Good evening, everyone, and welcome Ms. Leavy to our CFA Community Town Hall meeting. Glad to have you with us.
Glad to be here.
And welcome to all of our participants and guests. Glad to have you here today.
What is a TIF? TIF stands for Tax Increment Financing. Illinois law allows cities and villages to utilize tax increment financing as a tool to spur economic development where it otherwise would not occur. Many cities and villages have areas that just can't seem to get on their feet. These areas, caught in a spiral of diminished economic value and quality of life, could be called blighted. How are TIF districts created? A municipality conducts a study to determine if an area is eligible for tax increment financing because it is blighted or in danger of becoming blighted. If the area meets the state standards for TIF districts, the municipality determines the TIF district's priorities, creates a development plan, and prepares a project budget. Since 1979, more than 500 TIF districts have been created in Cook County. That's a lot of TIFs. How is TIF money generated? Property taxes are based on a taxing district's levy request and the equalized assessed value, or EAV, of the parcels in the district. Together, those generate the tax rates that appear on a property tax bill. When a TIF district is created, its EAV is frozen for the life of the TIF, typically about 23 years. But the value of the property in the TIF district increases as development occurs. Tax revenue collected above the frozen value goes into the TIF fund. Since 1986, more than $5 billion has been collected by Chicago TIF districts. If all of the TIFs in the city of Chicago were treated as a single taxing agency, TIFs would represent the third largest taxing agency in the city of Chicago, behind only Chicago Public Schools and the city itself. In recent years, TIF revenue has averaged $475 million a year in the city of Chicago and about $300 million in the suburbs. Detailed information about TIF revenue is available on the TIF reports page of cookcountyclerk.com. How do I know how much of my taxes are going to a TIF? If your property lies within a TIF, your tax bill will show how much of your payment goes to a TIF. In most cases, taxpayers outside the TIF pay more to generate the revenue requested by the taxing districts. For example, if a taxing district requests $1 million and $300,000 is diverted to a TIF, then taxpayers must pay an additional $300,000 to make that district whole. How can TIF money be spent? The TIF district redevelopment plan should provide project details and estimated costs. Some of the ways TIF dollars are typically spent include planning expenses, surveys, engineering, and consulting fees, acquiring land, environmental cleanup, and building demolition, infrastructure improvements like sewers and sidewalks, job training for businesses within the TIF district, constructing new buildings like libraries and office parks, renovating existing buildings, streetscape improvements such as light posts and landscaping, and porting, a term used to describe transferring money to an adjoining TIF to help fund another project. What happens when a TIF ends? Once a TIF district redevelopment plan is completed or the life of the TIF sunsets, the municipality must declare and surrender surplus to the county, which disperses the money to the taxing districts. Are TIFs a good tool? TIF districts can be an excellent tool if used properly. But TIF districts have also become controversial and the subject of scrutiny. Here are a few criticisms of TIFs. The term blighted is applied too loosely. Should a downtown high-rise be eligible for TIF funds? Parallel budgets. TIF funds are sometimes called piggy banks or secret budgets because the money is kept in a pot separate from other municipal revenue. Hoarding, where money in one TIF fund is used for projects in another TIF district. Do property owners in the TIF want the money spent in another neighborhood? If the money is ported, does it still satisfy the original goals of the TIF? Priorities. Should downtown continue to reap most of the benefits of TIFs? Should profitable, multi-million-dollar corporations be eligible for TIF funds? Is there a better use of TIF money, such as funding underfinanced public schools? Lack of transparency and oversight. TIF budgets and contract decisions are not always discussed at open meetings, made available to the public, or audited by professionals. Is it a success? It is sometimes difficult to gauge whether a TIF improved an area or if improvement would have occurred without the TIF. It may be difficult to see any improvement at all.
Welcome everybody this evening to our March 30th CFA meeting on TIF districts. We have with us today not only Mr. Johnny Diggs, but Miss Jackie Leavy to give us more information on TIF districts, what we should expect from TIF districts in our near future, and what could go wrong with TIF districts. Ms. Leavy, whenever you're ready.
Okay. I think that there might be a slide in the stack that talks a little bit about who I am, my background, but there it is. There I am. Okay. I'm a retired community organizer and planner. And for over 18 years, I was the executive director of a now closed down nonprofit advocacy group in Chicago called the Neighborhood Capital Budget Group. And basically what we did was we followed the money in all the public works and public improvement budgets by the city of Chicago, the CTA, the school board, and the city's TIF program, so that people in low and moderate income neighborhoods could have a better understanding of where their tax dollars were going. And I'm very proud and somewhat humbled to say that our organization was the first in Cook County and in the city of Chicago to pioneer research on TIF districts and to try to illuminate the issues involved with them. So I'm very honored to be asked to join in this conversation with residents of Maywood about TIF tonight. And what I would like to do is encourage you to look at the TIF document that Mr. Diggs has prepared, because on the page 10, I've come up with some basic questions. And before you guys can decide how you feel about the Village of Maywood proposing 4 new TIF districts, it's really essential that you try to understand what has happened historically in your community with the TIF districts that do exist. One was terminated and led to the Village of Maywood having to pay off some outstanding debt obligations that TIF district had created. The 2 others are in place, one of which, the Madison Fifth Avenue TIF, has actually had its boundaries expanded. So both of these TIF districts that you have now go back quite a ways. And Mr. Diggs and CFA have done a great job of pulling together this policy paper to give you a good understanding of the timeline of when these TIF districts were created and how long they've been around. By state law, most municipalities will create a TIF district to last for 23 years. But if they feel like they haven't accomplished what they need to accomplish for whatever reason, they can petition the state legislature to extend the life of the TIF for another 12 years. So you can go from having a TIF in place for 23 years up to 35 years. And in some instances, municipalities go for an even further extension, or they'll do something like what was done with your Madison and Fifth Avenue TIF. They will expand the boundaries. Okay. So they'll take in more of the property base of your community to be part of the TIF. And in some of the reports that you'll see from the Cook County website, you'll see a big jump in the EAV, or the amount of property value that's in the Madison Fifth Avenue TIF. And that occurs very abruptly between 2022 and 2023. And that appears to be when they expanded the boundaries. So that's not because the Madison Fifth Avenue TIF grew that much in value. It's that they added more property. So there are a lot of nuances here to be aware of.
Now, Ms. Levy,
Yeah.
pardon the interruption. I know, ladies and gentlemen, this young woman, when she states that her involvement in TIFs, she is a pioneer in TIFs, not only in the Cook County and Chicago area, but throughout the country, and is called upon by many communities. And we certainly appreciate her taking time out of her schedule to be a part of our informational and educational process. And believe me, it will be a pure joy. But let's dial back just a moment, because everyone, you know, if you joined late or just joining now, and you're curious about some of the things that we've already sort of given you a sample of what exactly is a TIF. It's tax increment finance project or program that municipalities can have. So we're going to, you know, basically have sort of like an off-the-cuff conversation, and we have our co-host, Mr. Jeff Fowler and Ms. Peggy Alexander joining us. So they're going to be sharing information also in the chat, but we're also going to open it up at the end. So if you have questions, if you have concerns, or just curiosity, Ms. Levy is going to be here, and we're going to be here to address those issues and concerns concerning the newly proposed, not one, not two, not three, but 4 new TIF districts in the Village of Eternal Light. So, Ms. Levy, can you give us again just a brief overview of what is the TIF?
Sure. I mean, basically, the idea is if your community has a distressed area that has not progressed in economic value and in property growth value, that isn't generating a lot of property taxes to help pay for everything that you want to see in your community. Maybe jobs and businesses have left town. The tax increment financing idea was that if we create a special geographic area and designate it for future economic development, we need a way to pay for that. So what we're going to do is we're going to designate this very specific area, come up with eligible projects like new infrastructure. And if we build it, they will come, meaning that private investment would be leveraged by the fact that your village is making an investment. How do they make that investment? They sequester or put in a special fund the property value within the TIF district boundaries, and anytime there is new property tax revenue above and beyond what was coming in before the TIF was designated, that's captured and put into a special piggy bank to be used just for the economic revitalization of that particular geographical district. Okay, so let's say the property is worth $100 and it's generating $20 in property taxes. Once it's created as a TIF district, if there's an increase in the value of the property above $100, an increase in property taxes that then flow from that increased value above $20, the difference goes into the piggy bank. The other local taxing bodies, like your school districts, your library district, your park district, and any other unit of government that can collect property taxes, they just get the revenue that they were getting before the TIF district was created until the TIF district ends. The promise that's being made to the broader community and to the other local governmental bodies that serve the public is that let us do this for 23 years. When we're done, everything is going to be worth so much more. We'll have a bigger property tax base for all of us to share in, and that all of the local taxing bodies will benefit from the fact that what was once a blighted area is now a vibrant area, the property being worth more, generating more property taxes. But during that 23 years where the redevelopment is supposed to be happening, the other local taxing bodies don't get to share in any new wealth or property tax revenue that's created. It's all in the TIF piggy bank. So it is an idea that unless we do this, if we don't create a TIF district, this area is going to continue to be blighted. this specific geographical neighborhood will not improve. We will not see new jobs or businesses or homes or public works improvements. It's just going to stagnate. So nothing will happen but for the TIF. That's the but for principle that you'll sometimes hear people talk about. And the the state set out some very broad criteria saying, well, you know, you have to be able to prove that this area is blighted or about to become blighted before you can use a TIF district to spur economic growth. Because,
Now,
you know,
speaking of that, when you were mentioning that certain property taxes continue to be paid to the local taxing municipal bodies, such
yes,
as, like you said, school districts, library, the park district.
right,
For instance, you describe then any monies over a certain equalized assessed value goes into the TIF piggy bank.
right,
And
right,
again, for all of everyone in our listening audience, TIFs are structured for basically 23 years minimally, but they can be
right.
correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's very common in Cook County and in Illinois and really around the country for people that are developers and elected officials that are interested in continuing a TIF district to extend it for 35 years. There are TIF districts covering almost all of East St. Louis, Illinois, that are going to be hitting their 50th anniversary because they've been around that long. They keep getting extended and extended and extended. So, what TIF is not, it's not a magic bullet that's going to automatically create new development. It's not automatically going to bring new jobs or new businesses to the area. It depends on how well it's administered and how strategic the planning is behind it. It is also not a property tax bill freeze. If you are a property taxpayer in the Village of Maywood, you're going to continue to pay at least as much property taxes as you pay now. But because of taking part of the property value offline, so to speak, taking it out of the mix of what the other governments can tax in order to meet their needs and budgets, somebody's got to make up for this. And there was a good slide in the Cook County Clerk presentation, the little video that was shown at the beginning of tonight's meeting. If you did not get a chance to see it, I urge you to go back to CFA's uh, website or Facebook page where this is going to be. Tonight's session is going to be available to you to watch that video because we worked long and hard with the Cook County Clerk's office to get them to do educational pieces like the video that was shown tonight that are very great graphic explanations of TIF. It's really not that complicated. Think of it as like a pie. You take a slice of pie out of the pie, right? That's the TIF's property value. Okay. Now, the whole pie is what all of your local government services need to deliver you the services that you expect to get. If they have a slice of the pie missing, people in the rest of the pie have to pay a little bit more in order to fill in the pie so that the village itself and the park district and the school board, et cetera, have enough money to operate. And that's what the levy is. That's how much money each local taxing body asks for each year to do their business.
Now,
So,
Ms. Levy, on the screen, we have just a few bullet points to talk about the benefits of the TIF that you've already
sure.
covered. But I think one of the most interesting things that I've been hearing from residents in Maywood is the question, basically, will the TIF, or if my home is in a TIF, will my property taxes still go up?
Yes, they can certainly go up. It depends on how much stress the other local taxing bodies are feeling and if they are able to get enough revenue from what's left of the pie I was talking about to meet their needs. But your property taxes can still go up. Your property tax bill is not frozen by being in a TIF district. The good thing is one of the reforms that grassroots folks all over Chicago and Cook County and Illinois fought for was to have disclosure on your property tax bill. And as the video from the Cook County Clerk's office shows, there's actually a line item now on your property tax bill that says if you are in a TIF district and how much of what you're paying in property taxes is going into the TIF piggy bank. Okay. So
Wow.
TIFs they're a tool. Okay. It's like if the only tool you have, is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, or does it go the other way around? What's the old expression?
Right. Yeah.
But so that's why they're prone to being used a lot. I mean, because it's available. Um, they offer wonderful promises of stimulating economic development, revitalizing a blighted area, creating jobs, increasing property values. Everybody wants their property to be worth more. We sometimes forget that the more our property is worth, the more property taxes we might have to pay, unless that whole pie really does grow larger, from the medium-sized pizza pie to the extra large pizza pie. And that's essentially what TIF is promising, is that after 23 years, you're not going to be living on a medium-sized pizza pie anymore. You're going to be part of an extra large pizza pie. So the property tax burden will be less for everybody. So if it's used well, if it's planned strategically, and if there's a lot of follow through and a lot of community engagement and great marketing, then a TIF can really pay off. It can bring new businesses, but you are at risk if there isn't transparency or accountability or good planning, that the TIF may just sit there like it apparently did in the TIF district that Maywood finally got rid of. And so there is a risk that unless you begin to get your head around how the TIF districts work, what you should be able to expect in terms of answers from your local government, that this thing could just sit there for 23 to 35 years, taking revenue away from your other local taxing bodies without necessarily producing the promised public benefits, the public good that should flow from economic revitalization.
Right. Now we're moving into that risk area that you touched on. And what are some of the financial risks associated with TIFs?
Well, I think the most obvious one is one that Maywood has already experienced, and that is if you make promises to developers and deals go south, or if you borrow money against what you anticipate is going to be the future revenue the TIF generates, it's a municipality that winds up holding the financial bag at the end of the day. So I believe that there had to be some monies paid directly by the Village of Maywood's general fund to make good on some of the debt that the old TIF district that was sunsetted had accrued over the years without producing enough revenue to pay for promises that they had made, financial promises they had made. In Chicago, there was a big risk of gentrification in some neighborhoods because our property taxes are so complicated in Cook County in Illinois that there was a lot of gentrification that happened, and there was a lot of displacement of low-income residents and small businesses. So unless you have some sort of community benefits agreement or real transparency where the citizens are holding the TIF administrator accountable for exactly what's happening and who's benefiting from the TIF district, you can actually see low-income residents and small businesses sort of moved out of the area and substituted with higher-end businesses and higher rents, higher property, home prices, and so forth. And there's just the fact that TIF talk can make some people dizzy, and unless you break it down in a common sense way,
Sure,
repeatedly, and you have clear expectations and specific questions that you're asking, there's a lot of ways to just talk around the topic and not really tell taxpayers and community residents what they need and want to know. And that's where the list of questions on page 10 come in,
yes,
and
definitely.
in the packet that Mr. Diggs has prepared.
Mhm. Now,
Uh,
let me break for just a brief moment, just to explain to everyone who's tuning in and visiting with us tonight a little bit about the background of these newly proposed TIF districts in the Village of Maywood. Um, I'm sure some of you are familiar with the information that has been disseminated by the Village of Maywood Community Economic Development Department, or the Village of Maywood Community Engagement Department. But on March the 14th, in 2023, the corporate authorities of the village hired a consulting firm, Ryan Kane McKenna and Associates, to prepare 4 eligible studies and development plans and projects to consider for the formation of 4 new TIF districts in the Village of Maywood. And that information, again, we will certainly make available to everyone in the community who wishes it or would like to just be curious about this information. And the new TIF districts that are proposed they're qualifying them as conservation areas. And Ms. Leavy has a very special understanding of the qualifications of what statutorily what it means to be a quote unquote conservation area, and the alternative that she's going to describe to us when it comes down to a blighted area.
Yeah, and without getting too technical about it, TIF districts have been around since the early 60s, and they were originally designed to try to revitalize the industrial base of Chicago and other parts of Illinois. And they almost always had in mind a private sector partner who said, yes, I will come and build a manufacturing plant, but here's what I'm going to need. I'm going to need some new infrastructure, new water lines and sewer lines in order to put a factory in, and I'll bring 300 jobs. And so TIF districts were designed around this, if we build it, they will come principle. And yes, the areas were initially, genuinely blighted. Nobody's sense of common sense would deny that a vacant steel plant that's fallen apart on the far southeast side of Chicago is a blighted area. As this whole enterprise evolved, developers and municipalities and consultants saw an opportunity to play with this a little bit. And over time, and by the late 90s, early 2000s, mid 2000s, the understanding of what was blighted or what was an area that needed to be conserved so it would not become blighted became looser and looser. And the state does not have any kind of hard and fast definitions. They have broad criteria. If you're in a blighted area, if they want to designate your neighborhood as a blighted area for a TIF district, there are more criteria that you have to say exist, and they have to be worse. If they designate your neighborhood as a conservation area, they're saying, well, you're not really totally blighted yet. And the new North Maywood TIF #1 is a great example. They acknowledge in their study, well, it's mostly pretty good to nice houses. It's predominantly residential area, but it could become blighted. So we want to step in now and conserve it. And conservation TIF districts have fewer criteria they have to meet, and they don't have to be in as severe a condition. So these conservation TIF districts are sort of, they're massaging the whole original purpose of what a TIF district, an appropriate TIF district should be. And quick example, in Chicago, in the heyday of Mayor Richard M. Daley, they designated most of downtown Chicago as a TIF district. Now, or multiple TIF districts. And pre-pandemic, in the 90s and the early 2000s, people were scratching their head and saying, say what? This, I mean, not only is this not blighted, what does it need to be conserved for? I mean, when it was still the Sears Tower, there was a tenant in the Sears Tower that got a TIF subsidy for opening a health club in the Sears Tower building. Got TIF money from the city of Chicago because they were going to try to conserve that building and they wanted to attract new tenants, blasey, blasey, blasey. Okay. So you just have to be super vigilant when it comes to TIF districts. And the conservation TIFs are not as hard to demonstrate or prove as a blighted TIF district.
So as we see, there are 7 of the 13 statutory qualification factors that in the Village of Maywood's proposal that they're qualifying for basically the 4 new TIF districts. Number 1, deterioration. 2, lack of community planning, inadequate utilities, lag or decline in the EAV, obsolescence, deleterious land or layout, and excessive land coverage. Now, citizens, once you take a look at these maps, and Jeff is going to share some of the hyperlinks so that you can see yourself the actual areas that they're proposing for these new TIF districts. And you have to ask yourself, as Mrs. Leavy is stating, sometimes they're kind of, I can't say embellishing, but they're stretching our imaginations to cover our community.
Well, another way to put it, Mr. Diggs, is to simply say that all of those criteria that you just listed and that are on the slide in the presentation tonight, very subjective. I mean, it's not science. TIF district designations and eligibility studies are more an art form than they are science.
Okay, so the difference between a conservation TIF area or a designated blighted area, they're again still meeting the 13 listed criteria, but a blighted area only has to meet 5 of those listed criteria, correct?
Well, actually, I think it's the percentage of the buildings in the study area that are of a certain
35.
age that is the giveaway here. I mean, because all of the criteria are very subjective. So building age, I mean, my home is 105 years old over here in Southeast Oak Park. And I would put it up against any new construction building that there is. Okay. So age, I'm 76, but I think I still got a little bit more life in me. So age of the property and the buildings is not necessarily, the tipping point. They have to have 3 of the listed criteria for a conservation area. They have to have at least 5 of the listed criteria for a blighted area. And then again, the percentages and the ages of the buildings. I mean, it gets, they want you to get lost in the tall grass. Okay. Yeah. So we don't want to do that. I mean, the bottom line is it's easier to call something a conservation area than it is to call something a blighted area.
Sure. And as Mrs. Leavy is saying, as you see on your screen, the designation of a conservation area requires that more than 50% of the buildings or homes in the study area are 35 years or more in age. So once you take a look at the proposal, you will see all of the PIN numbers, all the property index numbers, all the homes that they have already listed that they are considering of 35 years or more. And if they, quote unquote, meet that criteria. And again, there are 13 criteria that are suggested by statute. However, in a blighted area, at least 5 of the 13 criteria must be found meaningful. And in a conservation area, there are 7.
Actually only 3.
3, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now we move into an area where you can see for yourself the 4 proposed TIF districts include, and these are the basic descriptions of them. The first newly proposed area is the northern boundary of Union Pacific Railroad, limits to the South Main Street to North Village limits. So Jeff, if you would, please share that link in the chat. And for all of our participants tonight, you will be able to highlight that link and it will actually bring up the actual map. Trying to bring it up on my screen also so you'll be able to see it, but I don't think you'll be able to see it here. Okay. All right. And the second area, which is Maywood Middle, Area 2, is the northern boundary of Union Pacific Railroad, limits to Madison Street. And as you know, the Village of Maywood continues to have a Madison Street TIF district. The third proposed TIF area is Maywood Drive to Harrison Street. And fourth, Baton Drive to Roosevelt Road. Okay. And again, all of this there's a process in order for a municipality to basically conduct a process in order to enact a TIF district. Ms. Leavy, would you like to speak towards that process?
Well, I mean, they have to do what's called an eligibility study, and this is where the consulting firms come in. Kane McKenna was the granddaddy of them all. They worked with the original mayor, Richard J. Daley, back in the day to create TIF districts to bring industry back to the city of Chicago. They've now got a new name. They've been taken over by another consulting firm. But these guys are the masters at doing TIF eligibility studies. And that's where your criteria come in, and conservation versus blighted and so on. So there has to be an eligibility study. Then there has to be a redevelopment plan area plan. There has to be a projection of by how much do they think the value of the property within the proposed TIF district will increase in value. And there has to be a projection as to how much money, how much new property tax revenue, incremental money, that's where the increment comes from in TIF, could be captured in the TIF piggy bank. There has to be at least a very broad statement of what the budget would be, of how much money there would be in the TIF district over time and how that money would be used. But they're broad categories, and they're not required to come up with specific redevelopment projects, goals, objectives, performance measures, outputs, or anything of that nature. The TIF legislation that the state of Illinois has is just very general. So, but they have to go through all of that. They do have to notify every property owner in the proposed TIF district that it's under consideration for becoming part of a TIF district. They do have to notify all of the other local taxing bodies, so the library board and the school board, the park districts, et cetera. All those folks that also take in property tax revenue, they all have to be notified, okay? And then your local governing body of your municipality, in this case your village board, has to vote to approve it, okay? Public hearings, I don't think the state of Illinois actually requires them to have public hearings, but no municipality has gotten away without having to have public hearings for some time now, just because tax increment financing became so controversial in the 90s and the 2000s. I would have to double check that. I don't think there is a state requirement for a public hearing. But there is a state requirement. They set up what's called a joint review board that allows the other local taxing bodies to be notified of and privy to whatever the plans are and whatever the map looks like. But the other local taxing bodies do not get a vote. If they object, they can't say no to the municipality. It's just a courtesy. They're kept in the loop, information loop, up to a point, but they really don't have any power to turn down a proposed TIF district.
Right. Now, one of the things that I found interesting as far as the designation of a TIF administrator, that as you were stating, that the president of mayor and the board of trustees of the village designate the village manager as the TIF administrator, and
Right.
that individual coordinates what is considered the TIF interested parties registry. Can you talk about the interested parties registry and why that is important to have?
Well, that was one of the grassroots organizing tools that Neighborhood Capital Budget Group, my old organization, came up with in the early 90s, that we fought a long time to get. And that is to say, TIF districts are going to have such a profound impact, either for good or zero impact or for ill, on communities, that people who care, who are interested, ought to be able to have a way to find out what's going on with them. So we got created this idea of a registry of interested parties. So every municipality has to have an application form. So if you live in the TIF district or you don't, let's say you're a concerned public school parent, okay, you don't have to live in any of the TIF districts, but if all these go through, that won't be much of an issue in Maywood because everybody's going to be in a TIF district, it looks like. But you can sign up, and then you are notified of when the joint review board meetings are, when the annual report is filed. And it depends on how much community organizing you do as to how valuable and how viable the registry of interested parties is, because the people on the registry of interested parties can contact the village and they can request information. who's getting a TIF subsidy, what are the redevelopment projects, what are the infrastructure projects. But just by being on that mailing list, so to speak, you are in the loop and you get to exercise your voice as a citizen to say, hey, I want to know more. I am an interested party. I'm a taxpayer. I'm a community resident. I care about my community. What the heck is going on with these TIF districts?
And again, the life of a TIF is 23 years. So if you're interested in how the current TIF districts of the Village of Maywood have performed, and that information has not been publicly available unless you send a FOIA request into the Village of Maywood, and maybe you'll get a response. But the maximum lifespan of a TIF district is 23 years. Ms. Leavy, could that be extended or reduced?
Yes. Yes, and it's very common practice, especially in communities that have been struggling. Our Southland suburbs, our western suburbs, where there has been a lot of disinvestment by the private sector and redlining and things of that nature, all of those dynamics, the dynamics of racial resegregation that have impacted those communities over the years. It's very common for the municipality to say, oh, well, 23 years, oh, that's nothing. That's a blink of an eye. We want 12 more years. And they'll extend it from 23 to 35 years. And like I mentioned earlier, maybe some folks didn't hear me, but the city of East St. Louis has extended its TIF districts beyond even the 35-year time period. They're now approaching 48 to 50 years for some of the TIF districts that cover almost all of East St. Louis.
Wow.
And, we all want to see change and improvement in our communities. We all want to see more jobs, better businesses, better streets and sidewalks, better public facilities. But if it takes you 40 years to get it done, then you have to ask, what's wrong with that picture?
Sure, sure. And for those in the community, as we saw, the designated TIF administrator for the Village of Maywood is the village manager. And for those that have not had an opportunity to meet the current village manager, his name is Mr. Frank Torres, and his contact information is there. So we also have information for anyone that would like to sign up for the TIF interested parties. Our co-host, Mr. Jeff Fowler, Ms. Alexander, will certainly put this link in the chat so that you can certainly sign up. No strings attached. We hope everyone becomes a little bit more interested in becoming an interested party in registering.
And organizations can be on the registry of interested parties. If
not only individuals.
Have a block club, let's say, or some other organization that you're part of, Friends of the Library, Friends of the Parks, that would like to be on the registry of interested parties, your organization can also apply.
Yes, yes. So please spread the word. Now, one of the things that that Ms. Leavy also stated going through the document that we're going to share with everyone is that did you know that no TIF report has been available in the Village of Maywood since 2022? And there is a required law, and that is 65 ILCS 5835, that basically states that a tax increment financing report is due annually and must be submitted to the Illinois Comptroller's Office. So I don't know if the citizens knew that the Village of Maywood has not filed a required TIF report since 2022 to the Cook County Comptroller's Office. But one of the other things, and I have to share this with everyone, that in speaking with Ms. Leavy prior to our meeting, I asked her, what are the penalties of late filing? Because this is tax season, Can you share a little bit about that interesting tidbit?
Okay, well, y'all watch out for April 15th, because if you file late, you're definitely going to be penalized. Our municipalities, zero penalty for filing late. And, to be fair about this, communities that are truly struggling financially and economically, a lot of times it's a question of, do you have the staff to do the reporting that the state requires. But the state of Illinois has no penalty if a municipality reports late. So the Office of the Comptroller gets those reports. They're largely a financial report. They're just kind of like what your CPA would do. But what it's not a progress report on how the TIF is doing in terms of community impact. It's merely an annual report on the finances of the TIF district. Has there been a change in the money in the piggy bank? Has there been a bond issue taken out that's going to have to be paid off in the future by whatever future revenue comes in from the TIF district? Things of that nature. So it's more a financial report than it is. It's certainly not a progress report on how
Yes.
your TIFs are actually doing.
But as you're stating, there are penalties that can be assessed, but generally or usually the comptroller's office has not assessed.
No, there are no penalties.
Yeah.
I was making a sort of a dark humor joke about, if you're an ordinary J&Q taxpayer, the IRS will penalize you if you file late, but the Office of the Comptroller of the state of Illinois is not going to penalize Maywood for turning in their reports late.
Yeah. And it's kind of unfortunate, like you stated, if citizens are curious or want to find information concerning what type of activities or expenditures have been going on in the TIFs, it's good information to have if it's filed in a timely manner and available for residents. But if you're not there, you're kind of sitting, waiting, and guessing, what's going on in the TIFs. But the ironic thing about the fiscal year of 2022, the Village of Maywood TIF administrator, Mr. Torres, filed the 2022 TIF report January 7th of 2025. So that is available for review on the comptroller's website. And Jeff is going to share a link in the chat if anyone would like to see that, because not only does it have some very detailed information about the activities of that TIF, and it speaks also to the St. Charles TIF road that Ms. Leavy discussed that actually had to be shut down. And it was a part of a development project. Everyone loves the new Metro train station that was developed. Well, that was a part of a regional transit authority project, and the Village of Maywood had to come up with its part of matching funds and actually had to close down and drain the money out of the St. Charles TIF and then take $323,000 out of the Village of Maywood general fund in order to see that project materialize. So that information, again, wasn't made publicly available, but it's public information if you know where to look and find that information. But again, this information is available at the Illinois Comptroller's Office for not just Maywood, but all municipalities. Okay. And now, Ms. Leavy, we get to a point where we talk about some of the other resources available. You suggested again that everyone take a look back at the video that we'll make available on our Facebook page of the Cook County Clerk's Office review, that little movie about what is a TIF, but also information can be available and is available at the Cook County Clerk's Office that you can review TIF executive summaries that they collect, and they distribute this information. And that information is available, and we'll share that link also with everyone, because I found it curious also, despite the Village of Maywood submitting its TIF reports to give a detailed, itemized breakdown of its activities in the current TIF districts, the Cook County Clerk's Office has been collecting that information and collects that information for all municipalities within Cook County. So I know it may be very difficult to see, but on your screen below are the TIF distribution summaries for the TIFs from 2020 to 2023 as of current. And we'll share that information with those so that we can zoom in and see. And it has a lot of good information. It talks about when the TIFs were created. It gives you the specific TIF code, as well as it talks about the total amount that has been generated in that specific TIF district. Okay. And also, as you know, our local newspaper does and has covered this information, and we've received numerous messages from residents and citizens that says they haven't heard anything about these newly proposed TIF districts. They didn't know where to locate it on the Village of Maywood website. And was it in the news? They didn't receive any information. So we want to be able to sort of serve as a conduit to share the relevant information back. So we can share these links to the news articles from 2022 as well as in 2024 with you. And as you have heard early on from Ms. Leavy, that she actually took a look. There's on the Village of Maywood website where they describe the and show the PowerPoint presentations that were made in the communities throughout the four TIF districts, proposed TIF districts, but they also shared 2 of the TIF redevelopment plans. Now, hold on to your seats because it's about to get a little bumpy because our TIF expert, Ms. Leavy, has actually taken a microscope, not a microscope, but I'd say a magnifying glass, and she's looked at the first redevelopment plan. And one of the things that I noticed, even on the Village of Maywood website, that these redevelopment plans are still in draft mode. So, Ms. Leavy, what did you see that sparked your attention when you took a look at the North TIF #1?
Yeah. Well, again, it's a conservation TIF. And the way they describe it is, they say that the housing stock up there is really pretty good, but they want to conserve it before it gets blighted. So the actual document, this TIF redevelopment plan draft, is very generic. It is what I would call boilerplate. Now, if y'all have ever signed a mortgage or an apartment lease, you know what I'm talking about. There's standard language that goes into these legal documents that's the same for everybody, everywhere, and the pages and pages long. I mean, this report, I think, is 69 pages long, and there's not one specific thing in there about what exactly the North TIF District #1 is going to do in terms of, is there a specific goal to build X number of new affordable units of housing? Is there a goal to invest X number of dollars in assistance to local businesses? Nothing like that. It's boilerplate language that really speaks to the requirements of the Illinois statute to say, hey, yeah, we went up there, we looked at everything, it needs to be conserved, and we may do this or we may not do that. We may spend money on this, and if we do, God bless us. But the only really specifics in that 69-page document is on page 25. They talk about redevelopment plan area project cost estimates. This is basically a back of a Dunkin' Donuts envelope, napkin, back of the envelope proposed budget for that TIF district. They are talking about using money for land acquisition, site prep, demolition, utility improvements, public improvements, rehab of existing structures, interest costs, professional service costs. That means paying the planners and the consultants, job training, and any payments they might have to make to the school and library district, which I don't want to get into that tonight, but they're talking about having a proposed budget of $20.8 million to spend in North TIF District #1. But
so
these
they're saying
very broad areas of spending and the rough ballpark figures of what they'd spend in each of those areas is all generic. I mean, it's the roughest kind of estimate.
So the
they're not really giving you a plan. To call it a plan is really stretching the definition of plan.
So this draft.
I just want to throw one thing out there.
Yeah.
They're forecasting being able to have that $20.8 million budget because they're claiming, the consultants are forecasting that the overall property value, the EAV, in that North TIF District #1 is going to more than double
In
in value
23.
during the 23 years of the TIF, more than double. Okay. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I've looked at the stock market lately. I've looked at the interest rates lately. Things are not what they were pre-pandemic. Okay. So even with inflation, the notion that the property value is going to more than double during the life of the TIF district, there's
Mhm.
absolutely no guarantee that's going to happen. That is a forecast. And how do we know whether or not to trust the forecast? You look at what they've done with the two existing TIF districts.
Right.
And if you want to look at them, you need to look at them in terms of performance. What have they actually accomplished? What have we gotten from the two existing TIF districts thus far, now that they're already into their 35-year lifespan? Now, remember, these were created back in the early 2000s. They've already lived through their 23 years almost. And one of them I know has been expanded. Well, actually, they go back to the late 90s. So they're already beyond 23 years. Madison Street and Fifth Avenue, they had to expand the boundaries of it and got another time extension that way by making the TIF district larger. But where are the figures on where the money has gone? Follow the money. Who got any TIF subsidies? What did that buy you all? Did it bring a new business? Did it bring jobs? Did it bring job training? What public improvements were done? What were the price tags for those things? These are the kinds of questions that I would urge you to ask before you guys stand back and see 4 more TIF districts created in your town. And which developers have received TIF district subsidies? How much money have they gotten? Have any of the redevelopment projects that have already been completed in the 2 existing TIF districts, did they create any new permanent jobs? If so, how many? Has the village borrowed any money against those 2 TIF districts like they did for the old St. Charles Road? You know, promising to spend money that they didn't have yet.
Sure.
And just the simple question of, if you look at the 2 TIF districts that you all have, were the forecasts about how much they were going to grow in value and how much revenue they were going to generate, how accurate were they? And how do they line up with where the money has actually gone? Or is the Village of Maywood sitting on a TIF surplus in both of those TIF districts for projects that have not been done? Do they have any plans to obligate that money to pay for redevelopment projects that will directly benefit you, your neighbors, and your community? These are the kinds of questions that you need to ask. And this is all about asking the questions. You're not going to necessarily be able to avoid the enterprise of doing some grassroots community organizing to get the answers. But before there's more TIF districts in your community, it would be so, so important to understand what have the existing TIF districts actually accomplished.
Okay. Now, again, for everyone in the audience, just like she's saying, Maywood initially started out with 3 TIF districts. Currently, the St. Charles TIF district, it closed. The first year of that TIF, though, was in 1991. It is currently closed. We have the Roosevelt Road TIF district, which their first tax year was in 1997. The Madison Street Fifth Avenue TIF district started in 1998. But we're going to make all this information available to everyone. And as Ms. Leavy is stating, these are the type of questions that certainly not just the faithful few of those who participate in community town hall meetings or village town hall meetings to discuss this. Please sign up for the interested parties registry in the Village of Maywood. Because again, this is your community, your future. So again, we want everyone to participate. So at this time, Ms. Leavy, if it's okay with you, we're going to open it up for questions. Please raise your
Sure.
hand if you have a question, or put your question in the chat, and Jeff will read it out. And Ms. Leavy, certainly, I'm sure she's going to provide you with an excellent response and answer.
I'll try. And if I don't know, I'll say I don't know.
Okay. All right.
Okay, our first question in the chat this is from Miss Denise Pikes. And her question is, what does good accountability look like when managing a TIF district? But she said it's really not clear to her. I'm sorry, I'm making sure I read this right. It's not clear to her on how TIF districts entice developers.
Okay. So what good accountability looks like is if you go to page 10 of Mr. Diggs' presentation, if you get answers to all those questions. TIF districts can do a lot of things for developers. They can clean up a parcel of land and turn it over to a developer. They can lower the interest rates that developers pay when they borrow money to build something in your community. They can subsidize job training for current or future employees of a business that's operating within the TIF district boundaries. It also can, TIF district can entice developers to come to your community by doing simple things like, which really aren't all that simple, but rebuilding the physical infrastructure, doing the basic public works projects like hooking them up better to water and sewer lines, repaving the roads, raising the viaducts, doing a if it's a if it's a business area like for retail businesses or even for manufacturing, doing what we call a streetscaping project in urban planning, where they would beautify with public works projects the access to where the businesses are located, like new sidewalks, better, safer street lighting, better traffic signals, better traffic flow. All of those kinds of things can be enticements to somebody in the private sector to encourage them to come and invest in Maywood. But then it's not just a magic bullet. You just don't say, oh, we're in a TIF district. You have to have a program designed for that. You have to have folks that are on board to implement that, follow through. You have to have somebody that's really good at marketing the community. The TIF district designation alone, and even all of these different enticements that a TIF can offer, don't guarantee that things are going to get better or that things will get built and folks will get jobs unless there's a whole package and strategy and plan behind the TIF district. I hope that helps.
All right, we have a question from Miss Claudia Vandiver. Miss Claudia, would you like to unmute yourself? Ask your question, please.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, my question is in reference to the Fifth Avenue TIF where you were talking about the addition of those other properties to the TIF and the equalized assessed value. My question is this: in 2023, all of the properties in Maywood's values were reassessed. And so for those new properties that basically were added, the additional amount above the assessment, because you said that they were added in 2022, but then we were reassessed in 2023. So
Right.
all additional revenue above that would then stay in that TIF?
Yes, any new property tax revenue that was generated after the reassessment that is above what was being paid in property taxes before those properties were included in the TIF district is going to go into the piggy bank. So this is another phenomenon that we see a lot, is that broadening the boundaries of a TIF district can, especially if it's timed with the reassessment cycle, can create a magical increase in the EAV. It looks like, oh, everything's worth more, and it will show a boost in the amount of money in the TIF piggy bank. But it's because of the expansion of the boundaries and then the timing in conjunction with the reassessment cycle.
Right,
It's
but the
not
reason
necessarily evidence that things have really improved in value. Do you see what I'm saying?
Right, right. But the reason why I asked that is because we're scheduled to be reassessed again in 2026. So if they were to go ahead and start creating all these additional tips that pretty much looks like the whole village would be included in it,
Yeah.
then that would mean that the value above what the assessment is going to, or once we're assessed, or like if they created the tips, these new tips before 2026 assessment, then
Yeah.
potentially anything above and beyond would go to funding the TIFs rather than to pay for the village's basic expenditures through their corporate account.
Exactly. And also don't forget your school district, your library boards, your park district. You know, that capturing phenomenon would affect those other local taxing bodies. And that's one of the reasons why TIF districts have been so controversial. In some places, school boards have raised holy hell about properties being in TIF districts. Here in the Village of Oak Park, our school boards actually fought with the Village of Oak Park to take properties back out of some of our TIF districts back in the day when we still had a bunch, and say, no, we need that as part of our base EAV because we don't want to raise our levy to impact property taxpayers, and we need the money for our schools. So they did a carve out in Oak Park. But it was a similar type of dynamic of what you're describing. And yes, you're correct.
Okay, our
Excellent
next question is coming from Ms. Vicky Haas. And Vicky asks, during the daily course of a TIF life, when the TIF administrator is the village manager, does that manager have total control and decision making alone, or does he or she require staff and or board input and approval along the way?
I'm not as knowledgeable about Maywood as I would like to be, but let me tell you this: in Chicago, in the TIF districts in Chicago, the TIF administrator is essentially the city's Department of Planning and Development. They have to go before the Chicago Plan Commission and before the City Council to get approval of what are called redevelopment agreements. So there is a legislative branch of city government in Chicago that has to approve the deals that are cut with the developers. So let's say they want to give money to a developer to come in and build a new grocery store. And they want to do that by subsidizing the cost of the land, putting in infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's going to be a monetary value to that. It has to go through a planning review in Chicago, and you have to have aldermanic approval of the final redevelopment agreement, which is the contract that binds the developer to the municipality in terms of what the developer promises to do and what the city promises to do in terms of subsidies or incentives. Okay. So it's like a contract, and it's called a redevelopment agreement. So I'm assuming that in Maywood, and maybe Mr. Diggs can answer this better than I can, I'm assuming that in Maywood, your village board would have to approve a redevelopment agreement. Would that be right, Mr. Diggs?
Actually, there is a committee and commission process, but currently those proposals go to the Community and Economic Development. I think there's also an associated special projects person now who's involved in that process with the village manager before it becomes or goes to the board. It goes also through the village engineering, consultant also. One of the interesting things that you'll see, and that members of CFA has had to FOIA the Village of Maywood after certain pronouncements were made that local businesses, if they're applying for monies out of the TIF, and we hope to share with the public also in another town hall committee meeting, what are the eligible activities or expenditures out of a TIF or within a TIF district, and how does the adjoining aspect, of money being transferred from one TIF to another TIF for special projects, or how could it go awry? But we had to FOIA information from the Village of Maywood to actually see the application that local businesses, some of the newer businesses in the Village of Maywood, have applied for, and there is a cap of $25,000 that these businesses have received, whether it's been for facade programs or curb or minor improvements. But as Ms. Leavy is stating, should that information be more transparent and public before anyone, whether it's the village manager or department head, brings it before the board? Because as you state, as you see, and we all have seen, when certain issues are on the either agenda at a board meeting, and as you all know, the Village of Maywood Board of Trustees used to meet twice a month to take care of its community business. Now it only meets once a month. So the agenda items are usually kind of lengthy, and the meetings are just as long. But it's kind of surprising when we've been able to see certain information that has become, publicly available now, without prior discussion or without prior knowing that it has gone through the full committee process. It's just placed on the agenda. If it's not an issue that another trustee or other trustees, and they all have equal opportunities to discuss these agenda items. So we were able to FOIA this information and find that there were, just in the past 2 years, since 2023, there have been at least 6 businesses that have received money out of various TIFs. And other residents were kind of scratching their head. It's like, when did this happen? How did it happen? And, and why didn't we know about this?
Yeah, in Chicago, the aldermen want to claim that they're very influential over these TIF deals. For the most part, they're very dependent upon the staff. So staff carry a lot of weight in negotiating with developers or businesses about TIF subsidies. Municipal staff are often responsible for what I call the program design. Okay, what's going to be the actual program by which you offer assistance to potential investors or small businesses to get access to TIF resources. So it can be very staff heavy. And what we had to do was really work hard to produce a lot of tools for community residents to use, such as TIF community oversight panels, TIF report cards, just straight up organizing to say, hey, wait a minute, we want to know where the TIF dollars are going to go very specifically, who's going to benefit, how much they're going to get through which program. I mean, Chicago had a small business investment fund with TIF monies. They had a neighborhood investment fund through TIF monies for building owners, for residential building owners to help them. They had even a transit-oriented development TIF program that they designed. They had another program they designed called TIF Works, which again, the community pressed for TIF dollars to be used for local job training agencies to give job training and placement services to community residents to be able to get jobs in TIF district businesses. So all of this is just through direct dialogue and organizing and advocacy and insisting on wanting to know what's going on.
Right.
But there are ideas out there that are tried and true and have been tested, not just in Chicago, but around the country, to hold TIF districts and redevelopment programs accountable.
Yes. And thank you, Jeff, for putting this information in the chat. As you see, the businesses that we've been able to share back with you and the actual date in which those ordinances have been approved by the village, such as Covenant Health Ambulance Service. They received money from the TIF in 2023. The Exclusive Bar and Grill, Welcome to Maywood, received funds in August of 2024. The 50 Madison LLC received $25,000 in November of 2024. And as you see recently, the Windy City Ribs coming to 5th and Madison received $25,000. And as you all know, that was one of the more controversial aspects of monies being granted to that new business, is simply because the individual proprietor of that business is the special projects person who's an employee of the Village of Maywood. So questions regarding whether or not that was a conflict of interest, and if not. So if you go back and watch that village board meeting, you'll be able to hear that discussion and why you need to kind of sign up for the interested parties registry and stay on top of these things, as CFA will do in the future. Are there any other questions or comments?
I had a question, but I don't know how to put it in the chat. So,
okay, go ahead and speak.
I was wondering, I heard that the chat doesn't affect the property taxes of the people that live in the TIF district, that they don't go up or get lowered or anything like that. But I'm wondering, how are individual homeowners in a TIF district affected, if they are at all, by being in that TIF district? How are individual homeowners affected?
Well, it's not true that your property tax bill would be frozen. If you live in a TIF district, your property tax bill can still go up.
No,
And
I'm saying I understood that, but I'm
yeah,
asking what other ways
well,
are.
it depends on what they do with the TIF money. Let's say you live in a TIF district and you've got really bad alleys and really bad sidewalks, and you don't like the street lighting because it's not safe to walk down your block. Okay. If there's a true TIF planning process that includes the residents and the taxpayers, you could say to the village, hey, we want some of that TIF money to go for those things that would improve life for me as a homeowner and a resident of this TIF district. You're skimming the money off the top, the new money, and putting it into a TIF piggy bank. I want to see it returned to my neighborhood in these ways: new alleys, new sidewalks, new lighting. Those are all eligible uses of TIF money. Public works projects, public improvements are generally that's a legitimate way to spend TIF money. So you can benefit that way. It depends on what developers they're dealing with. Now, if they're trying to lure developers that are going to build, let's say, higher end residential properties, and subsidizing them by giving them free land or writing down their interest rates, you could wind up living next door or down the street from a higher end residential development that ultimately is going to contribute to gentrification, is going to raise your property taxes. And that's why it's so important for people to have a knowledge and an understanding of these TIF districts, and for you all to have your own community plan if there's going to be a TIF district. And for the existing TIF districts that you already have, follow the money, find out what the specific plans and projects are. Are they going to benefit you? You're going to know whether or not it's going to be good for you or not, because you're the local experts. You live there. And if that money is being reinvested in ways that are going to improve your neighborhood or not, you're going to know if you know what they are. But you have to find out what they are.
Yes, thank you, Miss Loretta Brown. She's one of our longtime community stakeholders, and always great to hear your voice and see your concern in the community, Miss Brown. Thank you. All right. Anyone else have a question or comment? People are sending their accolades to you, Miss Leavy, saying great presentation from Miss Mary May Larry. Thank you for joining us, Miss Larry. Okay. Miss Vicky Haas has a question, Jeff.
Yes. Ms.
Yeah.
Haas's question is it possible to require more, I'm going to say this wrong, specifics, I'm not even trying, before the plan is approved?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, and this is where small d democracy comes in. Y'all elect your village trustees and the people that represent you on the village board. And you can be very insistent and say that you don't want them voting to approve another TIF district unless and until the people in the community know what the specifics are. And just as importantly, and probably more importantly, for you all to get together and say, what do we want to see changed? What is it that we want as part of our people's plan for our community and for our neighborhood? And start with the existing TIF districts. If they can't show you where the money has gone, if they can't show you the benefits, the direct good things that have resulted from what they've done thus far with the two existing TIF districts, right? Tell you how much money is left in those TIF districts, and you have the opportunity to tell them how you'd like the remaining money to be used, then you have strong grounds to say to them, why are y'all even considering more TIF districts if you can't administer properly to our benefit the ones you already have?
Correct.
So yes, but it's by the will of the people. It's not because they're gonna say, oh well, we're not legally required to tell you what we're gonna do. Well, you have the power of the ballot, you have the power of your voices, you have the power of your community unity and your community love to take into this conversation with the people you elected to represent you. So absolutely ask for the specifics of what's on their mind, but you tell them the specifics that you want in the existing TIF districts and what the specifics you need to know. How much money is really left in those two TIF districts? Is it already been promised? What are they going to do with the money that they've already got in the two TIF piggy banks they have?
Correct.
Does anybody know? People in Chicago had to really fight to learn those things, but a lot of communities did learn, and they wound up coming up with their own plans. And where there were real questions about whether or not these were legitimate TIF districts, they even brought some pressure to bear on Daley and Emanuel as the mayors to retire those TIF districts early. In some places, some of the TIF districts went away in Chicago because the city could no longer justify them. Either they weren't doing anything at all for the truly disinvested communities, or they were sitting on top of places that didn't need any subsidy. So it is possible to get a result that reflects your values, your concerns, your priorities, but it's hard work.
Yes, ma'am. And we have Miss Dawn Williams who has a question. Welcome, Dawn.
Good evening. Thank you for having this TIF discussion. Maywood residents, we all need to get together and stand up against all of these TIF districts. I used to be a real good friend of Mayor Booker's. I used to walk his dog. We used to have long conversations over prior years before the fallout with him and the Maywood Park District. So I have been privy of a lot of his development plans that he has for Maywood. A lot of the vacant lots, a lot of the areas that he wants to say is blighted. He has developers that are targeted for those specific areas. He has businesses that is already, he has in mind for those distinctive areas that's going to benefit not only him, but some of his associates who's affiliated with him. Some of those projects have already benefited a lot of the people who are invested with him as well. So, you know, we've already seen examples like that one village employee who is an employee who benefited from a TIF funding. I can tell you who hasn't benefited, which is our Maywood Park District. You know, we haven't been privy to any of the conversations in the prior years. Whenever he's had meetings or informational stuff that we're supposed to be privy of, it hasn't been our district. It has been his handpicked commissioners who he's shared information with, or they've gone to the TIF meetings outside of our our Maywood Park District Board. So, and that's done on purpose. So, like I said, he does have a big development plan for a lot of areas in Maywood and all these vacant lots, all these properties, even with the Cook County Land Bank, even with some of the development that's been going on. It's already streamlined because his exact words was he didn't want Maywood to turn into another Little Mexico, like Melrose Park, because there is a large Hispanic population that are buying a lot of these rehab homes. They're even buying the properties that's already been rehabbed. So he wants to turn Maywood into another Black Wall Street, and that they're marketing properties only to those African American investors. So please just be mindful, pay attention. There's a reason why he wants to create all four of these TIF districts. It's, you know, he's saying it's going to benefit the Village of Maywood in the long run, but it really isn't, because I haven't seen how it's benefited my agency, even at being on the Maywood Park District. And it wouldn't just be the Park District, it would be the school districts as well as the library district.
Ms. Williams, I was listening attentively and thank you for that statement. I was wondering, is there a question out of that, or you just wanted to make that pronouncement?
I just wanted to, because just like previously in some of the documentation that was stated,
Okay.
it's
Well, I
saying
mean,
that I know that on the, how private developers can benefit from this if it's streamlined directly to them. You can see how the TIF, if that certain area is in a TIF district, then it would be streamlined to those investors that are targeting that area.
well, I mean, I think that the question here is, how do you get the information from the village? And I think you go through your elected representatives, and you just insist on getting answers. I mean, and is there a list of developers who've already been lined up? If so, for what purpose? What's been promised to them? Start with how much money is available. Do you all know how much money is available in the two existing TIF districts? And if any of it's already been promised to developers, those are great questions to ask. And that may get you to a point of greater transparency about what is or is not being planned for your community.
Okay. Now, one of the things I'll share this as residents, as you know, we the Village of Maywood previously had a community town hall meeting hosted by the mayor, trustees, and present were the department heads, and that PowerPoint presentation CFA has requested and FOIA'd that information. We have yet to receive that presentation. We wanted to share that back out with the community. That presentation is not available on the Village of Maywood website, but for those that were in attendance, you heard some very ambitious and some very grand promises and proposals that sounded a lot, it was a big, bright dream for the Village of Maywood, the Village of Eternal Light. But as you've heard tonight from Ms. Leavy and your concerns and your questions, maybe we need to take a dial back and take a closer look at the details, or have a firm understanding of how TIFs work, what are some of the risks, what are some of the benefits, as well as how do we get the other municipal bodies like the library board, the school boards in our communities, the park district, how do we get them at the table and then allow community residents and citizens and businesses and organizations to actually play a more participatory role in this entire process. So again, I really appreciate everyone taking time this Sunday evening in joining us, CFA, in basically talking TIF with the one and the irreplaceable Miss Miss Leavy.
I don't know about all of that, but
hopefully your schedule will permit you to come back and participate and share your insight and expertise in the future as we move forward. As everyone knows, CFA, please call, email, or send us a message on our Facebook page so that we'll be more than happy to engage and address any questions, any concerns of the community that you all may have. I want to thank, again, my co-host, Jeff Fowler and Miss Alexander for moderating the chat and putting all of that great information and making it available for citizens. We're also going to share that the document of everything that has been presented tonight. Everything is hyperlinked so that you can click on it and see the actual map. You can see the PowerPoint presentations. You can even click and see the information that is presently available on the Village of Maywood website. We've sort of condensed that information in one document to make it a little bit more user-friendly for you all. So again, I want to thank you all for participating. Ms. Leavy, thank you so very much.
You know what?
Can I
You
get
have
one
one more
last question in?
Ronnie.
Oh, we have
What?
one more question, please.
Yeah,
Yes.
we got one more question from Vicky Haas.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ms. Haas.
Is it possible, or is there a history of it happening at all, that property values do not increase and thus the anticipated revenue does not occur?
yes, absolutely. There have been a long history of stagnant TIF districts in the city of Chicago, I would have to do more research, but I strongly suspect that East St. Louis, Illinois experienced decades of stagnation, which is why their TIF districts are now pushing 50 years in age. It's a very complex process to bring about revitalization in communities that have been disinvested and redlined over decades. And it does not happen overnight. Hence, that's why the enabling legislation allows TIF districts to exist for 23 years or be extended to 35. However, there are sometimes conditions under which you don't see an appreciation in property value, and the revenue projections fall far short of what was initially forecast. And again, it's not a magic bullet. Just being in a TIF district doesn't make redevelopment and property appreciation, increase in property values happen. There has to be an entire package and strategy of efforts going into it, and constant vigilance on the part of your TIF administrators and community members and members of your business community in order to make it all work and come together. So it's entirely possible that TIF districts don't necessarily produce the revenue that's projected.
I was told by a former village manager that it's particularly, you don't want to establish a TIF right after the area has been reassessed, because the following year that isn't increased revenue, because so many of the people will be appealing their assessed valuation. And I know I did that last year and I was successful.
Yes.
And so
yeah, there's a lot of volatility, especially right now when people are feeling so hard pressed financially, and our overall economy is just so unpredictable. Yes, what looks like an increase in EAV may have to be further adjusted in the future based on those property tax assessment appeals. You're absolutely right.
thank you so much.
Yes,
You're so very welcome.
definitely. So, ladies and gentlemen, if there are no other questions, I will go ahead and close out this community town hall meeting. I want to thank everyone again from the bottom of my heart for taking time out of your Sunday to listen, to learn, and to talk TIF. Again, please like, follow, share. This information will be back on our Facebook page and YouTube channel so that we can share this with a broader audience because each one of you here I consider close friends and influencers of the community, and they certainly need to be in tune and in touch with what's happening in the community. So again, Ms. Leavy, thank you so very much.
You're very welcome. And good night, Maywood.
Yes. And for those that don't know, this young lady is one of the progenitors of TIFs. And please, you can just Google her name, her organization, take a look at the TIF Almanac, some of the publications from the organization that she was a founding member of. Maybe we can bring her out of retirement since she's our neighbor in Hope Park.
Not a chance. But I'll always try to be a good neighbor. Okay. All right. Yeah. Good night.
Okay. Thank you again. And to everyone, I hope everyone has a very safe and blessed night and very safe tomorrow. Remember, we encourage everyone to go out and exercise your divine right to vote on Tuesday. And everyone have a great evening.